Today I'm going to share with you how to make homemade apple cider vinegar so that you never have to buy it at the store again. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest. I'm a former New York City girl, but now I live the simple life with my sweet husband here in the Texas Hill Country. And this channel is all about cooking from scratch, living naturally, and creating a cozy home with charming thrift store finds. So if you're like me and you want to live the simple life no matter where you live, be sure to subscribe to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Now together in previous videos, we've all had a lot of fun making fruit scrap vinegar and citrus scented vinegar and all types of vinegar. And I really have to thank my friend Heidi over at Rain Country Homestead, who showed me that you can make vinegar out of pretty much anything. But long before I was making vinegar from fruit scraps and other things, I often made apple cider vinegar from just apples that I would have around the house, maybe ones that weren't looking too perfect, and I thought, well, what can I do with them? And so I would just make homemade apple cider vinegar. Now certainly you can make homemade apple cider vinegar from apple scraps, and I do that a lot. In the fall when we're eating apples and we have a lot of scraps on hand from peeling them and making apple pies and various apple desserts and so on and so forth, I'll often save up the scraps and make one jar after another of apple scrap apple cider vinegar. But making homemade apple cider vinegar from whole apples makes a really lovely, specially rich apple cider vinegar. And when apples are in season in the fall, I tend to buy a lot. And I keep buying them throughout the season, and we eat them and enjoy them and make desserts and so on and so forth. And these apples I've actually had for quite a few months. They've been in the bottom of my refrigerator, way in the back, in my back refrigerator that I have in my laundry room. And it's now, we're in the springtime and they're a little worse for wear. And so I think that it's time that I will use them instead of eating, but I use them to make homemade apple cider vinegar. And I'm excited to use the whole apple because I don't often do this a lot. I usually just use the scraps, but I love the rich flavor you get when you actually use the whole apple. And so since we didn't eat these and it is, at the end of the season and they're getting a little soft, this is the perfect time to use them to make the homemade apple cider vinegar. Now I've got 6 small Gala apples here, and I think that once they're all chopped up, they'll come about halfway or 2/3 up the jar, and that's the perfect amount. And all I'm going to do is just give them a rough chop, and I'm just going to remove, I'm going to leave the core and all of that in, and the only thing I'm going to remove is if I see any seeds and the stems, but everything else is going to go into the jar. Well, this is a little generously filled, but I think we'll be okay. Now the next thing you want to do is once we get all our fruit into the jar, then you want to take a 1/4 cup of sugar, and this is just plain white sugar. It is organic sugar, but it's just plain white sugar. And I want to mention that the apples that I'm making this particular apple cider vinegar with are organic. Now, if you don't have organic apples, I think that's fine too. You just want to give them a good washing. And generally what I do is make a mixture of baking soda and vinegar, and it kind of froths up, and I give the outside skins a good scrub with that and then a rinse. And I like to think that it at least takes off maybe some of the pesticides. But these are organic, and I'm using white organic sugar. And it's a 1/4 cup. We just go ahead and pour that right in like that. And then I'm going to top it off with some water. Now, what you want to do in terms of water, either filtered water or bottled water, or if you have a reverse osmosis tap in your house and you have RO water, as it's called, that's all great. But if you're taking water just from your kitchen tap, I would recommend that you fill up a pitcher the night before so that you can let some of the chlorine or the chloramides, whatever your local area uses to clean the water, to allow that to dissipate. Because chlorine and chloramides can interfere with the ability of the yeast and the bacteria to create a nice vinegar. So just fill a pitcher up the night before. Those chemicals will evaporate, and then you can use that to help make your apple cider vinegar. So now we're going to go ahead and pour the water in, and we're not going to go right up to the lip. And the reason is, and not even up to the collar, because as this starts to turn into vinegar, it's going to get very, very bubbly and whatnot, and it can bubble out and over and make a bit of a mess. And so you want to avoid that. So I'm just going to fill it up right to about here. Here we go. And now I'm going to use my chopstick to just give this a good stir and get everything nicely mixed. Now the next thing that we're going to do is you want to take a coffee filter or some cloth, whatever you have. You're going to simply put it over your jar, put a rubber band around to keep it in place, and then you're just going to set this somewhere warm and undisturbed in your kitchen. And then each day, you're going to want to uncover it, and you want to get out your chopstick or spoon, whatever you have. And I will link to put a link below where I get these chopsticks, because I know a number of you have asked me about them. And then you're just going to give this a little stir every day. And this helps move the fruit around, and it helps prevent mold. If you just leave it like this, you may develop some mold on the top. Now, is that the end of the world? No, because over time, this will become very acidic, and it will not make a very hospitable environment for the mold. But I don't know if you're like me, I don't want to see any mold. If I see any mold on it, I do get nervous, and then I don't want to work with it. But I know Heidi over at Rain Country Homestead has said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, it will become very acidic, and the mold will just be killed. But I try to prevent any mold developing in the first place. So what I do is every day, just give it a stir. You move the fruit around. You make sure that everything gets nicely covered with the liquid. Anything that's maybe been exposed, you know, sitting on the top here from the night before will now be submerged, and other pieces will come to the top, and so on and so forth. So you want to make sure you get in there and stir it every day. And sometimes even in the beginning, I'll stir it twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. Now, after a few days, you're going to start to see this get bubbly, and you're going to see little bubbles coming up, and you might see some foam on the top. And if after a few days after that, you notice that it kind of dies down and it's not really doing much, you can go ahead and add another 1/4 cup of sugar. Sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes it looks like it's doing very well, it's bubbling, it's foaming, everything's good, you don't need the extra sugar. But if in a few days you see it's not doing too much after it started, you know, so it'll start up and then it looks like it's dying down, then go ahead and give it another 1/4 cup of sugar, which will help feed the yeast and then ultimately the bacteria. And then they'll also be, as they grow and develop, they'll be eating the fruit sugar from the apples. And something I want to talk about, because this does come up a lot, you do not put any weight in here. You do not want to weight these apples down and submerge them under the water. And the reason is, the first stage of making vinegar is you want the natural yeasts in the air to get in here and start the job. Then, after the yeasts do their job, then the bacteria takes over. And it's called Acetobacter, I believe, and forgive me, I'm not a scientist, I may not be pronouncing it correctly. But Acetobacter is a type of bacteria that forms on the top, and it needs the air. And so that's why you don't want to submerge all of this. If you submerge it, you'd be doing something more like a different anaerobic fermentation. And for making vinegar, you want the air to be able, the bacteria that needs the air, the Acetobacter, to be able to breathe and start forming on the top. And so that's why we just use a coffee filter or cloth so that it can be exposed to the air. And we stir it every day to help prevent the mold. And over time, you know, as Heidi over at Rain Country has said, it'll start to become very acetic, and then, or, you know, acidy, and then you don't need to worry so much because the environment is very unhospitable to mold. But in the beginning, you know, I know as beginners, sometimes you've expressed concern over that. So that's why the stirring really helps. And it also speeds the process up. I've found that since I've started stirring my vinegars, especially when I was doing the fruit scrap vinegars, they turn to vinegar quicker than if I just left them to sit. So that's a nice tip too. So then, after about 30 days, you've been stirring, it's been bubbling nicely, you will find that after about 30 days, it's going to calm down. There may not be a lot of bubbles coming up. There may not be too much foam on top. You may see some how can I describe it? Some residue developing down on the bottom, which is a good thing. That's the mother, and we definitely want to have vinegar that has a nice strong mother in it so that it's raw and has all the beneficial enzymes that we like about raw apple cider vinegar, and especially in a homemade apple cider vinegar. And so after that 30 days, you will notice that it will definitely, as it's gone through the various stages over those 30 days, it will start to smell like vinegar. Now, you'll still have that kind of nice apple-y aroma that apple cider vinegar does have, but there will also be the pungent vinegar smell. So you will have a pretty good idea that, I think that it's turned into vinegar. And now, at that point, you can do a couple of things. If you're used to making vinegar and whatnot, you know you can taste it and you'll know if it's vinegary enough. Or you can use pH strips. There are different types of pH strips on the market, and some come in like little jars and they're little strips, and this is just more like a little tape that you just can pull out and rip and test it. And so after 30 days, you can use these pH strips, and I'll put a link in the description below as to where you can get these. These are also very helpful when you do fermentations. If you're new to making sauerkraut and things like that, and you want to know what the pH is, so that, especially when you're a beginner. I know when I was first making homemade sauerkraut, I was very happy to have pH strips to be able to check to see if I was doing things correctly. But in any event, it has a scale. These particular pH strips have a scale from 3.0 to 5.5. And I like to get my vinegar down to 3.0 or 3.5. But I believe that some people, are happy with it at 4.5 or 4.0. I really like to get it to 3.0 or 3.5. Now, that said, homemade vinegar, I just want to add this caveat, is not for canning. And as we go into spring and summer, we're going to be talking a lot about canning. If your recipes or anything you're doing with canning involves vinegar, you want to use the vinegar that you buy at the store. It's usually the white vinegar, because that is very scientifically formulated to be just exactly what you need for canning. But your apple cider vinegar that you make homemade can be used for various things. You can use it to make a salad dressing. You can use it as a hair rinse, which is really wonderful. You can put some in water and maybe mix it with a little honey if you like, or even seltzer, and make a wonderful probiotic-rich drink. You can mix some with water, use it as a nice little toner for your skin. There's so much that you can do with homemade vinegar, and homemade apple cider vinegar is especially nice. So I'm just going to cover this now. I'm going to put this in a nice little cozy place in my kitchen. I'm going to stir it every day for the next 30 days, and then when it's all done, I'll definitely come back and do another video, and I'll show you how we strain it and decant it, and how we use it. If you'd like to learn more about homemade vinegar, be sure to subscribe to my channel and then click on this video over here where I show you how to make homemade vinegar using strawberry tops. It's luscious. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.